of us here. Okay. Thanks, Jeffrey. Just forgot this meeting will be recorded, and as all our previous webinars, it will be available on HOT's YouTube channel within a couple of days. So I'm Michael. I'm currently the chair of HOT's training working group. And with me here today, Jeffrey Katteregger, who is the community projects lead of HOT, Ralph A. Toon, the online community engagement associate, and I guess well-known validation expert, and Walter Megek. There will be roughly 2 parts in this webinar. First, we will talk about building geometry, and in the second part, we will be mainly talking about building tagging and go on. So there will always be 3 of us who will not be talking, so the others will observe the chat. That means if you've got any questions, just write them in the chat, and one of us will either answer them directly or alert the presenter that he should maybe repeat something. And at the end, you will also get some contact information in case questions will arise later. So, so the first part about building geometry means that Jeffrey will be talking first about the basics of different kinds of buildings. I'll get back to you with a couple of advanced building constructions, and Walter will tell you something about taller buildings. So, and with that, well, I think, Jeffrey, let's start with your presentation.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Michael. Let me see if I can also have my video on. So I'll just go ahead and share my screen and take us through the first section. All right, so yeah, I think on my screen you should be able to see.
It's visible, yes.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, we're going to for today's webinar, we are going to be switching between using the ID editor and JOSM and showing us different things. So for this first section, I'll be showing us how to do rectangular buildings and also L-shaped buildings, showing different ways how to do it both in ID editor and JOSM. But we are starting with just some simple basics as we go to maybe more kind of complicated stuff. But let me just zoom into a place here in Uganda, which is called Gulu, and try to find some buildings to use for this first example. So for this first one, I'm using ID editor. I'm already logged in to my OSM account. And basically what I need to do is now to switch to the editing mode. Okay, so I'm just going to zoom in here and try to find a rectangular building that that is not yet mapped, that I can use to show you. So in ID editor, the way to map a rectangular building is to use the area tool, which is here, and I can have this building here, which is rectangular, but not yet mapped. So I'll just go ahead and trace it out by clicking on the corners of the building. And then so I've drawn a building, but what you may realize is that it's not yet tagged. So I'll go ahead and tag it here as a building. But still, you can see like the squares, the corners of the building are not square. So that's one thing to be mindful of when you're mapping rectangular buildings. Always try to make sure that your corners are square. The way to do that in ID editor is for you to right click here to have this menu. And with this menu, you have the option to square the corners of the feature that you have drawn. So I can do that by just clicking on square here. And now you can see the building is square. But the good thing, I'm going to undo here and show you also that there is a shortcut. So if I point on my square tool here, you can see that there is a shortcut I can use to get the same thing, which is Q. Yeah, when you use shortcuts, you have the ability to map faster. So yeah, the shortcut for, yeah, you just have to select your feature and then place Q. And you can see it has done the same thing. It has squared the building corners, but it's already tagged as well. So that's how you map a square building in ID editor. And now I'm going to switch to JOSM and just see how to do the same thing in JOSM. Okay, so Michael, can you confirm you can see my JOSM?
Yes, we can see it.
All right, thank you. So yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and download an area. Actually, download the same area here into my ID editor. And I'll load the imagery that I want to use, which is Bing. Yeah, so I'll find the same building, which is right here. So there are different ways how to do the same thing in JOSM. The best one is to use the Add Node tool and just click on the corners of the building, the same way how we did it in ID editor. So we have our shape here, and then I can go ahead and tag it. You can use the presets and search for man-made and then building and then apply presets. So I've tagged it as a building, but then still you can see that the corners are not yet squared. So the way to do it in JOSM, still you can come here on your tools menu after making sure that the feature is selected. And then you can basically say orthogonalize shape. But also you can see that this tool also has a shortcut, which is Q. So the shortcut basically is the same as what we had in the ID editor. So I can use the menu here and press Q, and my corners are now squared. But if I undo here, I can use also the shortcut. So if I press Q, you can see that the corners of the feature have been squared. So that is one way how to do it in JOSM. But the other way, which I would recommend, is to use the buildings tool, which is a plugin in JOSM. So I already have it on my menu here, but in case you don't have it, the way to add your buildings tool would be to go to preferences, and then you go to plugins, and then basically just search for building. You check it here, and then you click OK. And when you do that, your building tool will appear on the menu. And let me just undo this building so that I can show you how to use it. So yeah, if I click on the draw buildings tool here, I can simply just, you know, click on one corner, click on the other corner, and then I'll drag. So as I drag my mouse, you can see this is extending. So I just have to stop where the building stops, and then I click. So the advantage of using the building tool is that you don't now have to square the corners. The corners already have come when they are squared. So the building tool really helps you to map faster in that way. The other thing that I want to show is also how to map a circular building. So I'll start again in ID editor. So yeah, back to ID editor here. And yeah, a circular building on the satellite image array, it would look something like this. But just show you an example of a picture of a circular building. This is a hut, which was taken, yeah, picture was taken from in Tanzania in Maasai land. So yeah, this is how a hut looks like on ground. But yeah, on satellite, imagery, it will look something like this. So it is circular, meaning that when you map it, you can't map it as a square or a rectangular building. It needs to be mapped as a circular building. And the way to do that, I'll get my area tool here, and I will come and try to, click on the outline of the building. And basically what I'm going to do now is to, after drawing it, of course, I'm going to right click here, and I'm going to select this first option, which is called Circularize. But you also can see that it has a shortcut, which is O. So I can either click, you can see my feature is now circular, and then I go ahead and click on area and then tag it as a building. Okay, so it's a building tagged as it's a circular building, and I have tagged it as a building. So that's how one way to do it. The other way, like I've shown you, is to, still it is selected, and then I can just simply place O, which is the shortcut, and it will do basically the same thing. Okay, so that's how to map a circular building in in ID editor. You can use Circularize on the menu, or you can use the shortcut, which is O. So how do you do the same thing in JOSM? So I'm going to switch to JOSM again, and find the same building here. So the way we do it in JOSM, I just get my draw node tool, and then I'm just going to click on the corners of this building. So I've drawn a triangle, but now I'll go here to tools, and then I'm going to go to create circle. You can see that the create circle also has a shortcut, which is Shift O. So let me first use the menu, and then I'll also show you how to use the shortcut. So yeah, if I say create circle, then you can see this feature has been turned into a circle, but it's not yet tagged. So I still have to go to presets, and then a man-made, and then I tag it as a building. Okay, so that is one way to do it. The other way is to use the shortcut. Still, I'll draw my my triangle, still using the draw node tool. And then I'm just going to press Shift on my keyboard, and then O, and then it will turn it into a circle. And still I tag it either by going to the presets menu, or I can simply come to the tags menu here. And then I say this is a building, and then the value is yes, and then I say okay. So I've just done the same thing in in JOSM. And that's how to do a circular building. But one other thing I may want to show you is, you may say, okay, you have shown us the buildings tool. Can I map a building which is circular using the buildings tool? And the answer is yes. But to be able to do that, so I'm going to first delete this. I'm going to change the mode to select, and then I'm going to select my building and delete it. So if I want to use the buildings tool, it is selected here, but now I have to go to my menu here, and then I'm going to go to more tools, and then I'm going to change where it says building, draw building nodes. I'm going to say set building shape to circle. Again, if you don't have this on your menu, which says more tools, you can install what we call the utils plugin. So you go to edit preferences plugins, and then you search for what is called utils plugin tool. So this one here. So that's the one that will give you the more tools menu if you don't have it. So yeah, what I have to do is to come here and I say, set building shape to circle, meaning that now I just have to come here, draw a line. When I release it, so the line is going to the kind of the diameter of the heart or of the circle. And then once I release it, it will just draw for me the circle. Let me just undo and show that again. So I click on one end, click on the other end, release, and I have my circular shape for a building. And already it comes with a tag, so I don't have to tag it again. So this helps you to draw like very many circular buildings or huts. If you have very many of them in an area, you can quickly draw many of them using that tool. But yeah, if you want to now turn the tool back to drawing squares, now you have to come back here and say more tools, and then you say set building shape to rectangle. And now if I want to draw, for example, this building, which is rectangular, now I can draw it because I've changed my tool back to the other shape. So that's how you play around with the buildings tool for it to be able to draw either circular or rectangular buildings. The last bit I want to show us is how to map an L-shaped building. And I'll still start from ID editor here. So you can see this building here. It has an L shape. Okay, so how do you draw an L shape in ID editor? So in ID editor, I will come to area, and then I click on one corner of the building, another corner, another corner, another corner, another corner, another corner. And then I'll stop by darkening on the initial node. So I've drawn my L-shaped building. I can also tag it here, but still you can see the corners are not at 90 and not square. So I need to right click and then I say square. So when I say that, then it will square for me the corners. Okay, so that's my L-shaped building drawn in ID editor. How do you do the same thing in JOSM? So I'm going to turn to the Java OpenStreetMap editor. Again, this is an application which you have to install on your machine. So the difference between ID editor and JOSM is that ID editor is browser-based, don't need to install it. JOSM, it is an application which you'll have to download and install. So let me find my L-shaped building here. And I want to draw the same in JOSM. So there are three ways how I can do this. The first one is to use the draw nodes tool by just clicking the same way I did it in ID editor by clicking on the corners. And then I press Q, which will make the corners square. And then, of course, I have to add the tag for a building. Okay, so that's my building drawn using the L shape. Okay, that's one way how you can do it. The second way, I'm going to first undo this so that I use another method. So the second way how I can do it is by using the building tool. So using the building tool, what I will do, I'm going to draw one side here. Okay, I'm also going to draw another side here, like this. So it's like now I have two buildings which are overlapping each other. But now what I'll do, I'll get the select tool, which is the tool here. I select my first building. I select my second building. So then I'll go to tools. And then I'm going to say join overlapping areas. And once I do that, it's going to join the two shapes into one building, which is L-shaped. This tool also has a shortcut. So again, you select your two buildings. And instead of clicking here, you can also say Shift plus J. Okay. So yeah, if I press Shift on my keyboard and J at the same time, it's going to turn my it's going to merge the two overlapping areas into one building, which is L-shaped. That is the second way how you can do it. The third way, which is also very nice, and I'm going to undo this. I'm going to use what we call the extrude tool. So basically what I can do, I can still use the building tool here, and then I can first draw one side. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is to press X on my keyboard, and you watch my cursor once I press X. If I press X, this is going to change into a new tool, which is called the extrude tool. Yeah, and basically what I'll need to do is to double click here on my line, and a new node will be introduced on the line. But now I can click and drag this line. Okay. So once I drag this line, I just have to drag it until the extent of my L shape, and I have an L-shaped tool. Again, let me just repeat this. Get your draw building tool, draw one side, and then press X to activate the extrude tool. Double click at the corner and then drag. But I can also do this to get the right shape. So that is the extrude tool, which also helps you to draw an L-shaped building. Yeah, so that's it. That's how you draw L-shaped buildings, circular buildings, and rectangular buildings, both in ID editor and JOSM. Yeah, I'll stop here and yeah, hand over to my colleagues for the next part. Thank you.
So thanks, Jeffrey. And yeah, it'll be my turn again. Let me share my screen, and that would be this one. And it would be nice if someone could tell me, is my JOSM already visible?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Ah, that was missing. As always.
You can see your JOSM now.
Okay. So I'm going to tell you something about buildings sharing nodes, and buildings with holes, and buildings with or without layer tags. So building sharing nodes, that's a delicate topic. In general, we prefer buildings not to share nodes. And I can easily show you the reason here. This is an excerpt from a town in Ghana. And well, first of all, we have to find buildings sharing nodes. And that's where I came across a nice little feature here in JOSM. JOSM has a search form. You can access it with Control F, and it looks pretty intimidating at first. And there is something, usually it comes up empty and with a standard search syntax. In this case, I use the map CSS syntax, which is the magic behind the paint styles, and issue this one. So that means I start with all ways which are buildings, and then I will want to see the nodes which have a connection, which means which are not only connected to their parent building. And that gives us here quite a number of places where we see that things are not as they maybe should be. If you want to evaluate things like that, there is another interesting stuff here, and that's another plugin which I often use, and that's the to-do list. Just by the way, to-do list is a plugin pretty much like the buildings tool, and if it appears here and with an entry under Windows, and if you go in here, you get another to-do list tab in here, and if you've got a selection, you can simply say add. And the good point is then you can access the individual places which were found with this search functionality. You can also mark them as done, so you can work through the list. And well, let's pick a few examples here. This is a building which has a node with a highway. Of course, this is discouraged because hopefully in reality, buildings will never interact with a highway. There's only one exception to this rule, which I will discuss shortly. This is one of the reasons here why we say buildings should never share nodes. You see that these buildings here are not perfectly mapped. And what can you do in order to remedy that? Normally, you would select a building and say, let's square it. But unfortunately, if they are connected, this also affects other buildings. So same goes for this one in here. So that is one of the reasons why we say buildings should almost never be connected, because it's pretty difficult if you have an interconnected amount of nodes. It's pretty difficult to modify the geometry of a single building. And in the case of these 4 buildings, it's much easier to delete them all, or at least the lower 3 ones, and map them new. Yeah, same goes for this here. So please never let buildings share nodes with other buildings, and of course not with other highways. So yeah, this one looks interesting because, well, there is a gap between those 2 buildings. Why do they share some? If you go here and activate the middle mouse button, where you can browse yes, the objects at this place, you see that this is a duplicate. There are 2 buildings mapped perfectly above each other, so that probably was an upload failure. So yeah, that's also something which can be found in this way. And then we've got the only exception to this, and that would be here. If I just repeat the query, you can see it flags these 2 nodes. Well, this is a common situation. We have a filling station with a roof above it. And so there is a reason why these are 2 separate buildings, but they are connected here. This one is mapped as the usual building equals yes, and no other tag in sight. This is a roof, and here we've got a service highway which passes below this. The service highway, of course, has no other tags, no layer tag. It is on the surface. That's perfect. Now we've got a problem with the interaction here with the roof. And so for this special case, you don't say building equals yes, you say building equals roof. And you assign a layer 1 because, well, the roof hovers above the ground. So that's perfectly legal. And of course, the roof is usually directly connected to the building. So it is perfectly okay that you let them share nodes in this case. But that's more or less one of the very few cases where buildings should share nodes. Someone's not muted, so please mute your microphones. Thank you. There is another case where, well, one might debate whether buildings should get a layer or not, and that's an interesting intersection here. That would be a building passage, and that is something I'd like to show you here in not this one. Oops, let me just move to the other one. So this is a densely built area, a business district of Cape Town. And there is an inner courtyard in a building. And we've got an access way also for cars. So how is that mapped in here? Of course, the buildings are the usual buildings with building tag. And there is a service road here. And this service has no layer tag. And in order so that this is not conflicting with the building, there is a special tag. The building, as for this road, the service is a driveway, and it says tunnel equals building passage. And then renderers know what to do. They know that this tunnel passes through that building. And yeah, so neither the road nor the building should receive any layer tags. Tunnel building passage indicates to any renderer what it should do in this case. There is also a nice coverage here in the OpenStreetMap wiki. So tunnel equals building passage has explanations how to map and when not to use, and also shows a couple of examples. So the one I was showing you then is pretty much of this kind, where simply a part of the road passes through a building. Some of the more extreme cases probably will be something like that, that an expressway exit here passes through a building. Well, but technically speaking, this is a building passage as well. And yeah, the rendering is something I just showed you. There is also the case with the roof is also covered in the OpenStreetMap wiki, and so including all the tagging, and yeah, most examples will be filling stations, but there are other applications here, as you can see as well. So yeah, so that is about buildings and layers and buildings sharing nodes. Then I'd also like you to introduce you how to map buildings with holes, or which are known as multi-polygons. So you can do that both in JOSM and in ID. So let me start with the ID variant first, and we'll map this building here, which has an inner courtyard. So in ID, of course, you start mapping the area. That means start with the outer contour. Multi-polygon will only have one outer contour. It'll be a building, and we'd like to square it. So either use the context menu or the shortcut Q, so it's a perfectly squared building. And this building, of course, has all the relevant tags. Building equals yes. Then we take care about the hole. The hole, it doesn't matter a lot whether we use an area or a line. The important point is the geometry. So let me map this one here as well. And of course, we should square it. Don't worry about it having no tags. And then you hold down the Shift key and select both contours, the inner and the outer contour. And from the context menu, there is a merge function. Shortcut is C, which should be something like combine. But it knows what to do. ID knows what to do if you submit two contours like this, and one of them is a building. It generates a multi-polygon. So that means if we select the outer contour, it lost its tags. And ID shows us that it's part of a relation, and it's the building relation. So this building relation has the outer contour and has an inner contour, and the inner contour has no tags either. It didn't have any tags before. The important point when it comes to multi-polygons is the outer contour must first receive all the tags you would like to see with a complete multi-polygon. Of course, in this case, it would be a building. Multi-polygons can be used for other applications as well, for instance, an island in a lake or an agricultural field inside a forest. Here in this case, we have buildings, so we start with a building for the outer contour, and the inner contour doesn't get any tags because the area here inside is nothing in particular. If it would be, for instance, a water area, pond, something like that, or a swimming pool, then you would, of course, tag the inner contour with what this one describes. But usually with most multi-polygons for buildings, we don't need any tags for the inner contour. And afterwards, that's what's done automatically. The outer contour won't have any individual tags of its own. It's just relation itself, which carries the type multi-polygon and the relation for the complete multi-polygon, the tag for the complete multi-polygon, which is building equals yes. Of course, the same here is possible in OpenStreetMap as well. Well, this example is here from the area. There we are. That's our building. So once again, for the outer contour, we can use the buildings tool. Oops, the other one was still selected. So not like this. Then, of course, we should simply add points here with the draw mode A, because the inner contour is not going to be a building. So just close the line and press Q in order to rectangularize it. Again, go back to select mode, the one up here, or hit the S key. Select both contours and under tools, you will find what has the shortcut Control B. That's the create multi-polygon. And again, it does anything it needs for you. The outer contour lost its tags. You just have the multi-polygon relation and the multi-polygon relation. Just as in the ID example, it carries the relevant tags. So both ID and JOSM supported in quite a good way. Buildings as multi-polygons always have one outer contour, but can, of course, have several inner contours as well. You might have several inner courtyards. That's typical for larger buildings. Right. Do we have any questions concerning this? I didn't have a look at the chat.
Hello, Michael.
Yes.
You have one question. When drawing the inner courtyard, how do you make sure that the courtyard aligns with the outer shape so that the inner and outers would be parallel?
Well, typically, yeah, that's something I must admit, if someone knows a tool which does that, I'd be happy to learn that, but I don't think there is even a JOSM alignment function which can align edges of different shapes. Or are you aware of one, Ralph?
Hi, Michael, it's Kathy here from Australia. There's actually not a JOSM tool that will do it, but if you select the outer polygon and then draw the inner polygon, it will be parallel.
Exactly, thanks. That's a good point, yeah.
That's correct if you're using the building tool. Then that will work.
Yes, yeah.
Well, it's not just the building tool. If you delete it, if the outer one is still selected, and then you say that, I'm not quite sure. No, it doesn't snap. Yeah, that's right. Then you'd have to use the building tool. Exactly. And so first you start selecting this one, then you have the building tool, and then, oh yeah. But then you should select this one first and remove the building equals yes, because if you otherwise combine the two, you end up with the whole being tagged as a building, and that's not what you want. So yeah, that's something you really must not forget, to delete this building tag from the inner contour first. Yeah, but if you've got a more complicated situation, yeah, it might pay that you start with the outer contour selected. Right. And okay, so that's it for this, and then I'd like to hand over the microphone and the screen to to Walter, who will tell you something about mapping tall buildings and buildings with things on the roof.
Thank you very much. Let me turn on my camera. Yeah, so I will quickly share my screen. First.
Yes, it's there.
So you can see it?
We can see it, yes.
Okay, cool. So I quickly prepared just few slides, and the first thing is I wanted us to watch a quick video of what we expect when we are talking about mapping tall buildings. And essentially, this is how tall buildings will appear we're assuming that you're viewing this from a satellite or rather aerial view for those who've done cartography and all those. So basically, that is how an aerial view will appear, and we are looking at, these are commonly urban areas, cities, towns, and the likes. And how do we identify tall buildings? I've tried just to quickly do this quick presentation. Is tall buildings, we will first look at the shadow. If you see a shadow, then how tall, like the shadow will help you identify this building, how tall it is. So naturally, buildings that are pretty of a very low level have a very small shadow effect. Then, of course, we look at the texture of the building material. If you're looking at the side of the building, this side, so you can tell if you can see the roof of the building most of the time will have a different material from how the side of the building will be looking like. So you can be able to identify if this is a side, like, and how high is the building basically. Then, of course, the other very important thing is, I always recommend this, is identifying the ground level, so that it can help you to see the difference between the top of the building and the rest of the ground level. Then, of course, if we are looking at additional structures, mostly which appear on top of the buildings, mostly I like to look at, that is the texture of the roof material. Most of the time, if they are not, they are concrete roof materials, you realize that it might be different between the color, or rather the texture. If one is I don't know if you can see it in this space, one is slightly smooth, another one is not, the other side is rough. Then the other thing is what we call hue or color. These are basically satellite image interpretation skills, which for those people who've done anything to do with GIS know these, and remote sensing. Yeah, and then the last thing will be the shadow can really help you. If we look at this, the main tall building has a bigger shadow, but if you look at the other section of the roof part, the rooftop, which is the extra additional structure on the top of the building, it has that small shadow effect. So this one, at least it can help you to guide, to know which is the additional part of the building. And basically, when we are mapping, I'm just quickly doing this, then we will do a quick JOSM illustration, and probably pointing out major concerns that, or rather main mistakes that most people make. So this is an extract I got from Nairobi, just using the case study of Nairobi area, which is pretty much urban. So this is the Westland region. So I found someone had mapped this way. And if you look, they number one had mapped only a partial section of this tall building, and essentially probably they had split it into two. This is, I'm referring to the first image M. So to correct it, I simply mark those two sections, then you map that section of the roof, then you drag it. This one I'm going to show so that you map the building footprint of what exactly is happening. Then if we are looking also at extra features on top of a building, in image A, this is how it will look before you map. But then most of people tend to, if you don't identify the ground level of the building, you might tend to think that those small sections you're seeing on top that are labeled in green are individual buildings. So you might end up mapping like that, but the exact way how to map this is we're mapping the building footprint. So C is the correct way to map it. You only map the outline of the top of the building, then you drag it to the base of the building. That is where it intersects with the ground level. One of the most trivial situations or rather complex situations that we come across in image 1, you see these are like 4-story buildings adjacent to each other. This is in Milimani area. Mostly it's a residential area. So we have someone like in image 2, someone trying to map, and they're trying to show that we have a road that is right behind the 2 buildings. If you can see a road like crossing inside the building. So what essentially should happen if you submit this, it will give you an error. And this error is coming because the building is crossing a road. And in real essence, if you look on the ground, the road doesn't go through the building. So what you need to do is you need to adjust your building to where it merges the ground, then you leave the road as it appears. And I'm going to show this using a normal, a practical setup, how you need to adjust this so that then we switch through different images so that you can see how we end up getting such such mapping. And something also, because most of these things I'm presenting them here because we don't have the much time to go around doing all these illustrations. So in image E, as you can see, there is this building here. If you check in F, the one that is selected in red is what I'm referring to. If you look at image E, these are building in South Africa, and we are having different 2 versions of satellite images, both from Esri. They are very clear to say that is high resolution buildings, but then high resolution imagery. But then if you look at building F, this is how the first person mapped it. But then if you switch to another Esri image, it gives you now a different perspective of how the building looks like because of the position of, mostly we get this effect because of the position of the light in relation to the satellite, where it's collecting the data directly from the Earth. So as the Earth oscillates, it tends to shift where you're viewing the building, which side from, and that's why you get this effect. So if you observe keenly from image E, you will end up mapping that building. If you have the concept of image E, you will map it as I've mapped as it's been mapped in H. But then if you don't have the perspective of how it appears from image E, you might end up mapping it as F. So these are the different versions of how you view things. And mostly some of these tasks are mostly in urban areas. I know they might look very complex for beginner mappers, but often you will get these challenges, and most of the time you will need to map them or interact with them so that you can build your trust, or rather your confidence in mapping. So quickly, I will just want to do a quick illustration in JOSM of how these phenomena happen and how we go around mapping them. So I think they should share an entire screen here. So I've tried to check out for this area in, I loaded this from the tasking manager, a project we are working on in the Westland area. So in this image, I'm focusing specifically in this area. I'm focusing here. So if you look at this from basic observation, there are people who will feel that probably whoever mapped these had an issue with the understanding, and probably they wanted to map these small features on top of the building. But essentially, if I try to switch between other images, you will realize that these buildings are correctly mapped because they are right behind this tall building. So if I switch these and give you this is a drawn image, right? Yes, you realize that we are having small buildings here. Yes, I understand they're not correctly mapped, but I'm not going to adjust them because of probably the background image that was used. But then we are having this tall building. So this one is giving you a different perspective, or rather view of the same building. And now when we switch to, let's say, to this, you realize that this building, so essentially this is the roof. But now you want to map the building footprint because we are mapping building footprints. So essentially what you're supposed to do, I'm just going to delete this, but then I will undo because I don't want to do any changes. So I want to map this building, and I'm using the case study of, this is a JOSM. Geoffrey has showed us all those other tools. So quickly, I'm going to use the building tool to do this. So I simply click B, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to map the roof of this building. And what I'm going to do is, as I mentioned earlier on, that you have to identify the ground level. So the ground level is somewhere here. So I need to drag these and the entire of this section to where the building intersects with the ground. So I'm going to bring it somewhere here. So this is how exactly you're supposed to map the tall buildings. So if you look at these ones, they are correctly mapped, even though from your, you might feel like they are not there, or in whatever perspective or perception of how you're viewing this, but it's completely mapped correctly because of the effect that this is where the building is standing on the ground, and these buildings are correctly mapped from, if we compare this to a different imagery. So these are just some of those situations you will come across, and you need to take more time to understand how the mapping happens so that you don't have to probably delete features which are probably there and you didn't have to compare through different imageries. And of course, we always mention this, that when you're mapping some of these areas, it's always important that you can add several of your imagery so that they can really easily help you to identify features, to make a difference, or rather observe the difference between different, like rather make a difference in how the features look on the ground. So you need to have several imageries the way I've worked to observe how these buildings exist here, because if I didn't have this layer here, then I will never have known that we had buildings that are located right below here. So in the other cases, I will definitely, if I'm not sure enough, I will probably delete all these ones and leave this one and just to this side, and probably you're deleting buildings that exist there. So I think that is probably the only thing that I will share when it comes to mapping tall buildings. And of course, how much error will it cost if you mapped this and left it at here? So we want to look at how much offset exists here. If you want to know the offset, you can simply draw. If you observe down here, there is always this one that shows a measurement. So if I drew a point by adding a node here, pick from here to here, if I checked, the moment I changed this to meters. So if you checked here from here, this is 31 meters. That is how much I'm trying to, that is how much an offset I will have achieved if I map the roof of the building without necessarily dragging it to the right position. So this is why we always map the building footprint, and building footprint is where the building interacts with or rather intersects with the ground level. So that is how mostly we map tall buildings, and it's not in all cases, because in some cases, the roof of the building might not necessarily be offsetted to in reference to the ground level. So what you simply need to do is you will basically map the roof of the building. I don't know if we have any cases that I could, of course, if we wanted to map such a building, I will simply do this. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this to this level here. the ground level. Probably this road doesn't get here, or because if it truly gets here, and then this one should never have intersected here, so probably this road is not extending inside the building. So those are things you need to take care of, and I think that is it, unless we have anyone with a question, and then I can respond to. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Walter. Questions which arose have already been answered in the chat, so that's perfect. And yeah, so there's also finishes the first part of this webinar, where we were talking mainly about geometry issues, and in the next part we will dive deeper into how to tag buildings properly. And so let me share my screen again. Okay, this one please, and share. Okay, that should work now. And yeah, can I get some feedback? Is the screen visible?
Yeah, I see a screen.
Okay, thanks. So here again, we're back in the business district of Cape Town, and there you see various kinds of buildings. And when we talk about tagging buildings, it is mainly about, well, usually we say building equals yes, which makes it a building. And when we do remote mapping, there is, well, hardly any option how to differentiate that. But other important tags, of course, is a name. Please tag buildings only with an official name. As you can see it here in this business district, some of these buildings have names, like, of course, this Grand Central Shopping Center will be an official name there, 11 Adderley probably as well, or this First National Bank building. So typically, those are the names which are associated, well, which you can read about the entrance. So this is typically not some knowledge which you can easily gather in remote mapping. I've seen the names abused for commentaries. Please don't do that. So don't write in it that this is a building or any other comments. There are tags for comments, so please use them if you need to add some comment. And well, then we have the general dispute what to do with the purpose of the building. So if it's completely used as a government building or completely used as a hotel, then it's pretty clear that this will be the purpose of the building. Well, if we have a look at the map data in this area, so then we can say that, for instance, okay, here in this case, the hotel is just a point of interest, so an additional node placed inside the building. It's not used for the building proper. I think it's pretty much the same down here because, sorry for that. Right. This case here is a little bit different. If we have a look at this building, yeah, the whole building is tagged as an office and the name here. Yeah. So, I mean, if a building, let's say, is used 80 or 90% for one single purpose, such as it's a hotel only and nothing else, of course, you can tag the complete building also as a hotel. So with the appropriate amenity tag. If it has several uses, then of course it's better to leave the building just as the building, maybe with a name, but the individual businesses which can be found in the building should go into individual points of interest, as in here. Again, this is something you will mostly apply when having local knowledge and not in remote mapping. There is one notable exception, though. Of course, we do have street level imagery which can be used for this purpose, and that is mapillary. So you might have a look if mapillary can be used there. It is available both in JOSM and in ID as an additional layer. And you want to know all about how to use mapillary in order to tag buildings properly. There is something you might want to note. In our last advanced ID training, this is the one from October 2022, and share the link in here. The last half hour was, well, Jeffrey talking about how to use mapillary. So that means you simply advance in this video to pretty exactly 1 hour, and there you go. And the last half hour is Jeffrey telling you, oh no, not this one. That's the commercials which always come here. We'll tell you anything you need to know about mapillary and also some caution, because it's pretty much the same as with aerial imagery. The imagery is not necessarily from the same year. So unfortunately, we don't have vintage dates for many imagery layers. We get them for Bing and Esri only. But mapillary usually has a date attached to the images. So before changing some existing use here, please have a look if that mapillary image you're looking at is somehow recent. And it is, yeah, as far as the tagging is concerned, so if you want to add individual POIs, that makes much sense for smaller shops because you can place them at the proper position. There is also a tag level which could be used for multi-story buildings in connection with indoor mapping. So the OpenStreetMap wiki has lots of information about indoor mapping if you want to detail that. Always keep in mind that you should only use publicly available information. So basically what you can see from outside when adding the names of shops and offices, and also the names of buildings. I mean, these ones might be building names which might be visible across the entrance. Sometimes it is also local knowledge which might be used. So if you live in the area and you know a building is called by everyone with a particular name, you might of course add that as well. But please don't invent something just in order to add some commentary about the use of a building. And as far as, yeah, you already said this, the default tag for the building itself would be building equals yes. I mean, whether it's an office building or anything else is, I think, less informative in the building tag. It's more important than to map the proper use, either by specifying, for instance, the kind of office or the kind of shop to be found there in the building. So I think that's it mostly as far as tagging is concerned. And let's see. Don't see any relevant questions here now. Then I think we can move on with Ralph's presentation about life cycle management and buildings in areas.
Yes, hi everyone. Okay, so we are going to start dealing with some more complex tagging. And seeing as we are a humanitarian and dealing with disasters, one of the problems we have is tagging items that are no longer there. So in some cases, it's important to note that there was something there, and we need it still to be shown so that old imagery and other people looking at planning maps and things like that don't change the feature to indicate that it is still there when it isn't. So we have something which is called a life cycle prefix that we add to the tagging to show that it is there, but it isn't. Right, let's see if I can share my screen now. Right.
It's visible, Ralph.
Right, okay. Now let's just see if I can add my. Right, can you see life cycle prefix?
Yes.
Lovely. I love it when it all comes together. Okay, right. Yeah, here we have the life cycle prefix. There's the wiki page, which tells you all about it. And it's a very useful tool for what we are doing, right? Where can we use it? Right, it can be tagged to use for objects that are in a transitional stage. Like something that's proposed. So it's not there yet, but it is proposed to be put there. Now, if we put a building there and we don't add the proposed, someone opening up the imagery will say, oh, there's nothing there, and delete the building. And this is what we need to avoid, is this conflict of old imagery and future items, or something that's in a transition. So it's going to change, or it has changed from its previous feature. So proposed, planned, disused, abandoned, demolished. These are all things that we could add as a prefix. And now, right, so a prefix is something that's attached before the key tag and separated with a colon. So disused colon amenity equals pub, construction colon amenity equals parking. Here are examples of how this prefix is attached to an existing tag to show that it has changed. And while it may be on the imagery, it is actually no longer in use as a pub. It's no longer, well, it's under construction, so it's not on the imagery, but it is already in the process of being created. And this is a transitional thing. So, of course, once the construction is complete, it does become amenity parking. The disused pub its function someone can buy the pub and change its function so it becomes something else. So while there is a pub there, we don't want people to understand that, oh, there's a pub there, I'm going down there for a drink. If it's disused, then no, we can't go there for a drink. That's no good. So there's an example of that. Right, now, in context of disasters, the building, oh, excuse me. There we go. Okay, the building is no longer there. It's gone, or the highway is destroyed. Then that would be highway tertiary would then get destroyed. Colon highway equals tertiary. So the original tagging still remains. We just put in front destroyed or damaged. Now this is important during a disaster for us to for the authorities to work out what is the extent of the damage, For the first responders, where are the buildings that have collapsed? Because that's where we need to go to look for survivors under the rubble. So these are important, that although the building no longer exists, there's a pile of rubble, the building still needs to be shown for people to respond to it. So although OpenStreetMap does not want us to show items that are no longer there or are not there yet, there are certain functions necessary of the use of OpenStreetMap that requires that we show this, or we use it to prevent someone from changing. So here we go. It is possible to clearly mark that specific objects must not be remapped without proper verification. So in other words, it's saying, yoo-hoo, hello, please go and check what is the status of this area before you change, because you might be seeing a building on the imagery, but there isn't a building there anymore. After verification that the feature has gone beyond its life cycle or transitioned to the next stage, it can either be retagged or deleted if there is no more danger of it being accidentally changed. So deletion is another way of stopping the life cycle prefix. A life cycle prefix indicates that it's in a transition stage. Right. So while we are, as you can see, as we go through and learn more about OpenStreetMap, we find out that while the hard and fast rules of saying don't map something that's not there does apply in general, we have in actual fact got these little anomalies whereby we still need to show something to prevent OpenStreetMap being misused or accidentally changed. Right, that is the life cycle prefix. Any questions on this, Michael?
There is a question. Detail asks if these tags are visible on the map. I mean, yeah, well, the answer is typically, well, on the map, it depends, of course, on the one who set up the map. And within JOSM, there are a couple of paint styles which I think render the life cycle, yes?
There are paint styles which show a building is not labeled as building yes. So that is something that can be picked up by a paint style. The validator paint styles are the ones that do this. Now, there is something that I want to point out. That
Ralph, can I interrupt, please? Because on this question,
yes, go ahead.
If you map a building as damaged, you just see the shape. It's not getting a color, but the colorway map style gives it a color, a red-white interrupted color. So as far as I know, that's the only map style that flags damaged and destroyed buildings.
I think there is a specific map style that looks for damaged buildings, but that you would have to check.
Colorways is the map style.
Yes.
That's the one I made, so I know for sure that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Martin.
Thanks.
Right. Now, one other thing that you must understand about life cycle prefix, historic objects. Historic objects with no relevance to current state of an object must not be mapped on OpenStreetMap. This can be put on Open Historical Map, but not put on OpenStreetMap. We can't map for everything that's happened in the past. That is really difficult, which is why Open Historical Map was created to allow for this. One of the things that a life cycle prefix does allow for is to actually give a date. when is the motorway under construction going to be completed or expecting to be completed. And that is a helpful indicator as well as to how long the construction tag should still be used, the prefix should still be used. So we can go back and check that. For a disaster, there can be a date, so it could be damage date, damage :date equals, and a date given. So in other words, we know when it happened, and if it's over a year ago, why is it still there? So that is also very helpful to know in the life cycle of this feature. All right, moving on then. So we're looking at something else that people seem to struggle with, and that is, let's just say, amenity areas. It will apply to other areas as well, but amenity areas with several buildings and components. So how do we handle this, and how does the one affect the other? Right. The hard and fast rule to remember, do not duplicate tags. We have a wiki page, one feature, one OSM element. So you can't have an amenity inside an amenity, or a land use inside a land use. Or you can't have a building, yes, with the node inside that says building house. So you can't have that a building inside a building. So please remember that, and that's when the difficulties start to arise. So let's take a look at these multiple use areas, right? I'm going to choose a school and talk about a school, but many of the things that I am saying will apply to the other items as well. So here we do, first of all, we draw an outline of the area. Now, the outline on its own can be amenity, school, land use, education, and a name, and you can see the name there. Now, that is not a problem. We can add a building, which is building equals school. Because there is no building tag on the outside perimeter, it is not a duplication. So building school is also. This building equals is important because you could have another building, which is building equals hall or assembly hall. You could have another building, which is another function. It could have a dance studio inside the school grounds. Certainly this happens in places where you have an academy of arts, and you can have that sort of thing, or a gymnasium. So those can all go as long as they're not inside the same building equals school. Now, on the outside, sometimes there is a fence around the whole area. You should not have amenity, school, land use, education on a fence. The fence may be the exact boundary of the area, and you want to put the amenity on top. Don't add it to the fence. The fence is a linear feature and not an area feature. So the fence is only a linear feature on the outside. What you can do is select the fence and create a relation. And that relation can then be tagged as amenity, school, land use, education, which will sit on top of the fence, but it won't actually be the fence, in which case your this will then apply to the area and not the linear fence. Right, now, moving on, there are other features which are inside the amenity school, and those can be a leisure playground with a surface, a leisure schoolyard with a surface, a leisure pitch with a surface and a sport. And all of those, although they are leisure, they're not inside each other, they are separate elements. And because the leisure tag does not clash with any of the tags on the outer perimeter, this is still fine. This is not a problem. And this can be done multiple. Ignore the little a, that was an error on my part, sorry. Right, now we come to where we start getting into the nitty-gritty. Let's just say that the building school has got houses two different schools. It's not a separate building. There's no separation line within the building. So it's not two separate buildings abutted or adjoining. However, part of the building school is a junior school, and part of that is a senior school. So what we do to show that is we keep the outer building school, and then what we do is we use a tag, a node, a single node, which will then be tagged as amenity school and the name junior school. And you have one tagged amenity school and senior and name senior school. But that means if the name is the same as the outer, then we need to get rid of the name on the outer one. However, if the grounds are called ABCDEF Academy, and inside the academy is the junior school and the senior school, then we can keep a separate name on the outer perimeter, ABCDEF Academy. And inside is the junior school and the senior school. Now, this also affects the addresses. If the junior school has a different or separate address to the senior school, then you can't have a single node with two addresses. So you still need to have two separate nodes. Now, to be able to get the tag to come up, the tag has got to have amenity school on it. If you've got amenity school on your node tag, then you need to delete it from the perimeter. Because you have then putting amenity school inside an amenity school, and that will always flag an error and cause confusion. So amenity school will come off and amenity school will go onto the node. This does not affect the building school on the building, because that is a separate key. So once again, we've applied the ruling that you can't have a amenity school inside an amenity school, and we've met that condition. Now, moving on, we also now have the ability to put it an amenity parking. Amenity parking with amenity school on the outside is a difficulty. So it could either be made into a multi-polygon. So the outer would be amenity school and the inner would be amenity parking, in which case the amenity parking is not inside that it is excluded from that, but it is still there. This would be okay. It can be excluded from the boundary if it is being run by let's say, a private company. But if it's being run by the school or maintained by the school, then it has to be inside the school grounds and is shown as an amenity parking, access private, and any other tagging that's going on there. But that would clash with your amenity school. But in this case, where you have not. Now, I've shown here two separate buildings. Now, in this case, it's very likely that the two separate buildings will have two separate addresses. So you need to have the amenity school and name of school on the building school, inside the building school and inside the building school. And now you have two separate schools inside the grounds. Land use education still remains. It's not clashing with anything inside the school, so that the land use is remaining education. So that is also okay. The separate name, if it's an academy and those are schools within the academy, is also good to have the name ABCDEF Academy, while you have the junior school and the senior school as on separate nodes inside. So this is all inside an amenity, but remember, you are making sure that you do not transgress the rule of having an amenity inside an amenity. Land use would be the same, having land use farmyard inside land use farm farm. Yeah, I'm running ahead of myself. Okay, so you understand that you can't have a land use inside a land use. You can't have a farmlands is what I was thinking of. Land use farmyard inside land use farmland, because it would indicate that you're plowing up the farmyard. That is not the case. So you can see that any farmyard inside the farmlands would have to be a multi-polygon with the farmyard as an inner and the farmlands as an outer. So it's excluded from the actual plowed fields. So that this is the multiple use. Right. No more questions?
Not yet, no.
Oh, that's lovely. Wow. Okay, then it's back to you, Michael. I'm going to stop sharing.
Yeah, and yes, so I have the closing remarks for this webinar here now. And the question is quite generally, when it comes to buildings, but also other objects, of course, what should you tag, and is there anything you shouldn't tag? Quite generally, the basic rule in OpenStreetMap is it must be verifiable on the ground. So you can map anything which you can see on a sign, whether it's written on a building or some commercial ad, which tells us which company is in there. But please respect privacy. When it comes to buildings, never add the names of of people living in there. So most people will not welcome their names to be published on a global map. So please only map details about commercial entities which advertise themselves. Either they have some sign on display or they are present in the media. So whenever it's clear from a public ground that this is used, for instance, for some company or a hotel or a shop, mostly they will be interested that their commercial entities will be present on maps, but never ever map anything about private residents. So, and quite generally, it should also be current. As I mentioned, when you are there in person, of course, you can see what's there and map the current state. If you use, for instance, mapillary imagery or some high resolution aerial imagery, keep in mind that this might be easily 10 or 15 years old and might not necessarily reflect the present state. So hesitate to change any existing entries unless you know that the imagery you're looking at is current. So, yeah, if something is clearly demolished and and the tags still say that there is some office or some factory inside, of course, you can remove that in this place. So this is house numbers. Yeah, well, that's what I see in the chat. Well, house numbers are things visible on the ground, and of course, they can easily help you to navigate. So if you know that you need to see some office in house number 56, and you see a map and see, oh, when I'm there, I'm at 340, that is maybe a certain mile away. So I'd say a house number is nothing which violates privacy. So it's easily visible from far away. Usually you can easily read them when you drive along the street. So that's okay, but not the names of residential homes. Yeah, well, I think we've answered hopefully all of your questions right now. So that means we'll come to the final remarks of that webinar. Let me share the screen again. So first of all, of course, I'd like to thank my fellow presenters who helped me in realizing this webinar, and I thank for all of you participants. Yeah, without your interest in that, we wouldn't be able to present these webinars. So thanks for being with us, and thanks for your questions. If you've got further questions after this webinar, you're not lost. We're there to help you. You can either send an email to mappersupport@hotosm.org, or for general questions about the training working group, you can also use training@hotosm.org. We generally use HotOSM Slack as a communications platform. So if you visit the website slack.hotosm.org, you will be asked to answer a few questions and verify that you've noticed some of our regulations, and then you will be sent credentials in order to join. There are lots of channels there. You first end up in a general channel, and Mapper Support is one of those channels. The training working group has a channel. There are also channels about validation. So just browse them. Usually, well, nobody can, of course, guarantee a 24/7, 15-minute response time, but usually we'll get answers fairly quickly. If you send an email and don't receive an answer within a couple of days, just ask again. We usually answer every email, but one or the other might slip our attention. And if you want to know more about the humanitarian OpenStreetMap in general, feel free to visit the website www.hotosm.org, where you can see what other working groups are there, what this humanitarian OpenStreetMap team is doing in general. So yeah, these were hopefully interesting 1.5 hours. Thank you for being with us, and hope to see you in another webinar on another occasion. And yeah, the recording should be available within a few days, I hope.